Hi, and welcome to Matt Holman Talks Mental Health, the podcast where I have the opportunity to sit down and chat about mental health with amazing humans. For this episode, I'm so happy to welcome Zarrin to the conversation. Welcome, Zarrin.
Thank you. Thank you, Matthew, for having me.
Oh, you're more than welcome. It's lovely to see you. So, as I will always do, just a very brief introduction, just how we know each other. We were actually introduced by a mutual connection, actually, somebody who I'd recorded on a previous podcast. So thank you to Tracy Jarvis for that introduction. But I was introduced to Zarrin, and when I started doing research into what she's up to, what's going on in her world, it was just a brilliant opportunity to have an alternative perspective yet again for one of these conversations. So welcome to the conversation. Please do an introduction to yourself.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Matthew. I am a consultant cardiologist. I now have a very portfolio career with a couple of things. I'm still doing cardiology within the NHS, within the community, but on top of that, I'm setting up a project that I'm very passionate about called the Fresh Heart Project, which is all about positive health messaging and finding tips, tricks and tools to optimize your health and re-energize yourself using, small, sustainable, achievable lifestyle measures.
Brilliant. What a lovely introduction. So nice and easy. So we're going to unravel all of that because there's a reason why you do what you do, of course, and we'll get to that reason during your journey of your conversation and when you tell us all about what you do. So the big question, your journey with mental health, because that's the frame for this conversation. Tell us a story.
Yeah, goodness. So I'm glad, first of all, that we're actually having these conversations, because I think so many of us feel quite lonely going through journeys and think we're the only person. But as soon as we start talking about it and start having these discussions, we realize we're not alone, and a lot of other people are either scared to speak up or scared to share. And so thank you, Matthew, for allowing us to have this space. So I'm a consultant cardiologist, as I said. I qualified, it's coming up to 20 years ago. I qualified in 2001. So I've been on the front line of the NHS since then. It's been a very long road and an enjoyable road, I'd say. When I first started, I loved it. I loved my job. Back in 2001, we were a team. I really enjoyed the work that we did. I felt really supported. We kind of hung out together, we worked together, we had each other's backs, and I really felt that medicine was my purpose, my ikigai, as the Japanese say. And what I would say is that slowly over time, things started to change. In 2005, I decided to specialize in cardiology. It was something that I really fell into. I hadn't really thought about it much before, but I did a job in it just for some experience at a senior level and absolutely loved it. I thought, right, this is the path for me. I love cardiology. I'm going to do this. And it's very, very, very male dominated. Currently, there are only about 8% of cardiologists are females. That figure might have changed. It might have increased slightly this year, but still very underrepresented. So, and back in 2005, I was called the girl by my consultant, and because I was such an anomaly, and I did what we all do. I just worked incredibly hard because I felt like I had to just up my game in everything. I did a PhD. Which is quite challenging in and of itself. But, I learned lots of valuable things from it now, looking back. I then, in 2012, I got married, which was wonderful. I then had a child, and I was very, lucky to have a child. And then I came back after mat leave, and that's when I really felt things changed for me. It was okay before then to carry on going at 100 miles an hour at work, almost neglecting everything else. But at that point, I couldn't do that. And I really wanted to be present for my son. I really wanted to be there when everything was happening. I wanted to look after him, to drop him everywhere. And it just wasn't working for me. I felt like I was just doing a bad job of everything. And I didn't realize that I was so fatigued. I didn't realize that I was so burnt out, and I ignored all the warning signs that I was getting. So I was getting things like brain fog, where I would say half of a sentence and I totally forget what the second half of that sentence was going to be. Yeah. I'd get anxious about things that I wouldn't really normally get anxious about. I'd get stressed and snappy. I was having sleepless nights. For me, sleep is one of those things that goes quite quickly when I'm stressed or anxious, and I really wasn't sleeping well at that point in time. I wasn't really looking after myself. I was trying to do everything. Slowly over time, I started getting physical symptoms as well. And really, it wasn't until then that I thought, oh gosh, something is wrong. So I went via the medical route. I took tablets, I had tests, nothing really was found. I ended up in hospital for one night. And then it wasn't really until one of my friends turned to me and said, Zarrin, are you looking after yourself? Are you eating right? Are you sleeping? Are you actually having any time for yourself? And it was like a real eureka moment, because I really wasn't at all. I wasn't looking after myself at all. I was trying to be there for everyone and do everything and be the best doctor and be the best wife and mother. And I felt like I wasn't doing a good job of any of it. And as a result, it was affecting my health. And then I was due to finish my cardiology training in 2017. And I realized, you know what, I'm going to take a bit of a break. And I did. I didn't launch into a consultant job after that. I thought, right, I'm going to look after myself. And I did really little things to start with, but it made such a difference that I didn't need to take any tablets. I didn't, all my symptoms vanished. And I realized that a lot of the things that I was experiencing were because of my own stress and my own burnout and my own fatigue. And it was at that point that I thought, oh gosh, if that worked for me, what about for my patients? And it was a paradigm shift for me, because I looked at, I deal with a lot of cardiac issues, and the large majority of what I see in clinical practice is down to non-communicable, preventable illnesses or preventable risk factors. And through no fault of our own, through our busy modern lifestyles that don't make it easy for us to eat well or sleep well or exercise, it's through no fault of our own, it's become really hard to have that self-care. And I started addressing it with my patients. Simple little changes were really helping. Blood pressures were coming down. People's heart rhythm issues were getting better. And I thought, you know what, there is something here. My focus, I trained in cardiac imaging, and then I became really interested in cardiac prevention. Right. And I thought, this is where I'd like to continue. And that's where the Fresh Heart Project kind of came about as well.
Wow. What an incredible journey. There was another point in the first conversations that we had where you talked about the hiding at one point when you were going through some of those things.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that? Is that okay?
Yeah. So that was a little bit further on. I actually knew at that point that I wanted to work in cardiac prevention. Yep. I still at that point in time thought, you know what, I've trained for coming up to 20 years at that point. I started medical school in 1996. I've been training all that time. At that point, it was over 20 years. I thought I needed to get a consultant job, a proper consultant job, and then kind of this on the side. And so I moved my entire family, sort of over 300 miles from a city that my husband loved, Liverpool, and for a job that I thought would be the job. And we sort of downsized as well, because what you can get in Liverpool is so much more than what you can get in Woking. Yeah. And the job was horrendous. It was quite a toxic environment, and I was quite naive to walk into it without really doing any research. Okay. And it was going through a period of restructuring. So I think it's really improved now. But when I was there was a lot of change. There's a lot of toxicity, and their workload was out of this world. And it was really stressful. So I found it really stressful. And I found that I couldn't talk to people about their lifestyle or prevention of heart disease. I just kind of was going through the motions with it all. And about a year into the job, it was I think I'd had just a horrendous on-call. There was just chaos all around me. I had so much work still to do. It was like the week before Christmas, and I just had to run and hide. I couldn't cope with it anymore. So I hid in the toilet cubicles and had what I now appreciate is a panic attack.
Yeah.
And at the time I was really confused. I didn't know what was going on. I thought, oh man, I've got to go, get myself together and go back to the wars and finish off. Yeah. And I really, it was a particular low point for me, because I was also terrified that someone would find me and just judge me and think, oh God, she's just not resilient or not coping, or, just what is she like? And it was a particular low point for me, that point. And then the week after that, I handed in my notice. I thought, I want to work in a different way. I want to practice medicine in a different way. I want to build the Fresh Heart Project. I love being a doctor. I do think I'm good at being a doctor, but I just don't want to do, I want to do it in my own way. And I didn't think I could. But at that point in time, I was like, well, what are the alternatives? So I handed in my resignation. I didn't have a proper plan. But honestly, looking back now, that is one of the best decisions I've made.
And it was at a point where you had to make it, right? I think that was the part of the conversation, that what would have happened if you hadn't have taken that choice? What would you think would have happened next?
Yeah, I think I would have had some sort of breakdown, or I would have been off with stress. I think I would have had to just take time off. I mean, leaving a job is not easy when you've just moved, and we just bought a house at that point in time, and I didn't really have a proper concrete plan as to how everything was going to roll out. But and right now I am doing NHS work, and I'm really enjoying it. Actually, I'm doing it 2 days a week. No, actually, I lie 3 days a week.
Okay.
And I'm working on the Fresh Heart Project as well. Brilliant. Hopefully the sort of balance of that will shift as time goes on as well, because I do want to do a lot more on the health messaging side of things. But if I hadn't been given that push, I don't think I would have done it. I don't think if it hadn't have been that horrendous, I wouldn't have done it. And if I had stayed, I would have become ill.
Yeah. I think this is the message that we're trying to portray with these conversations as well, is that reality of if I'd have stayed, or, I think about my parallel world of when things happened to me. If I'd have stayed in that role, I don't think I'd have been well, in a long or medium, short term, maybe even. And sometimes we do need that, don't we? Our body has a wonderful way, and you'll know more about this than I would, of course, of showing us or telling us to slow the heck down sometimes. So when you resigned, I really want to get into your mind around how you were feeling. I honestly understand the panic part of that. But when you resigned and you felt like, okay, could you breathe? Was it sort of a release? Of course, there's other anxieties that start flooding in, mortgage payments, all the things and commitments that we've got. But that first reaction, how was it?
Relief. Real relief, actually. It was real relief. I mean, I went on a bit of a roller coaster of emotions. My initial, and what I then realized is that your initial emotion is probably the most accurate, actually. It was a real relief, but it was sad at the same time, because I'd been climbing this ladder to become a consultant cardiologist for over 20 years, and I'd reached that goal. I felt like I was letting everyone down. I felt like I was letting women down, because there aren't very many women in cardiology, and I didn't know how I was going to combine still being a cardiologist with doing the Fresh Heart Project. So there was no clear path at that point in time. Finances were a bit difficult. So there were lots of conflicting emotions, but I would say that the overriding feeling was relief. Okay.
Yeah. How was I'm intrigued to understand, of course, you talk about your, being a woman in a business, or in an organization where there's not many women present. What was the reaction of you resigning? Did you have any feedback on that? Was people sort of reaching out to check in with you, or did it just sort of go, well, she's left now, so let's just leave her to it?
Yeah, no, I mean, my colleagues at that hospital were actually really friendly. I mean, it wasn't them, it was the toxicity of the way that it was all being restructured that was was a problem. They were really concerned, actually. They were concerned that I'd made a very rash decision and that things were going to get better, and that I just bought a house. What was I going to do? And
they were concerned about your house, were they?
They were concerned
about pay your mortgage.
They were concerned about the sort of practicalities of it. They were concerned. I think a couple, I think they were very supportive, but they were concerned that I hadn't really thought it through. And were there other options that could mean I could sort of stay on a different basis?
Yeah.
So yeah, I think there are lots of things that they just didn't have a power to control to make it, better. And I think I now know that what I really enjoy is this portfolio life, is a bit of doing, a lot of creativity that I'm bringing to my job now. I know I couldn't have done within the confines of, a full-time post. And I like it. I like the freedom now. Yeah, but my colleagues were actually supportive. And interestingly, actually, it opened the door. So I had people coming up to me going, "Wow, you're brave. I really don't like it." And just people that I hadn't really spoken to before were talking to me about it because I was making that move. And they felt that I was no longer someone that they felt that, because I was leaving, I was someone that they could talk to, which was nice, actually, that they felt that they could talk to me, but quite sad that there aren't any, that it took that, me leaving, for them to open up.
It's a tricky one, isn't it? But it's fascinating to sort of hear your perspective on it, of course. And then we move forward. So thinking about where you are now, this portfolio that you talk about, I think that's just a fascinating world. We shouldn't just be one thing, and we can evolve and do many different things if they're interesting and they're part of our journey, I guess. But Fresh Heart Project. So what was your design around that? Give us insight. I'm really intrigued by this story. You've had an experience, you've had, your thoughts around what you want to do and, how you want to help, clinically support people. So what happens?
Yeah. It's actually evolved with how, as businesses and projects and ideas do, from how I imagined it in the first place to now. So Fresh Heart Project, the sort of fundamentals are still very much the same. Fresh forms an acronym for the pillars of good health. So F stands for food, R stands for relaxation, and with that comes stress management. E stands for exercise, S stands for sleep, and H stands for honesty and compassion, where you are honest with yourself about what you can reasonably achieve through your own means and at that point in time for you. And compassion, I think, underlies all of it, because any health journey starts with self-compassion, starts with, not blaming yourself for anything. And so what I wanted to do to begin with was have physical sessions and group sessions and things, and I still may do that, but at the moment it's become an online platform for positive health messaging. I'm doing podcasts, I'm doing little videos. I think the power of story connects. I think it can be a really lonely place to be ill, and I'm putting out stories very similar to, talking about our stories and our journeys, just different health journeys, just to tell people that they're not alone. It can be a very lonely place having heart issues. And it's nice to hear people who have gone through it and listen to what their experiences are. So I'm putting that out as well. And I'm hoping to expand into a bit more. I'm producing a film at the moment. And so I've got lots of little projects lined up.
How did you get to producing a film? How did you get into producing a film? Where was that on the plan? Is that?
Actually, so I think one other reason why I've been able to do all of this is that I've got I'm so lucky. I've got a very supportive husband who has sort of he's encouraged me to follow my passion, follow what I want to do. He's not been so kind of bogged down with all the practical aspects. He just wants me to be happy in what I'm doing. And he is a video producer, and he's directed some of his own short films, and he's currently setting up his own short film platform, online short film platform. So we think he's the producer of my podcasts, which is why it's quite a nice, easy way to be able to put content out. And I actually met this really inspirational lady who had had a heart transplant, who'd really taken her second chance of life and lived it really to the fullest potential. And she's just an amazing storyteller, and I thought her tale is so captivating. So I introduced her to my husband, and then, you know, a year or so later, we decide to make document her journey through a film, and that's currently, you know, in the pipeline.
Incredible! Wow, what a transformation from being on the wards and the rounds and the things you were doing in cardiology to now having all these different things. The portfolio expands, right? This filmmaking, podcasts. It's incredible. I think what a wonderful journey. You know, what an experience to. And what I love as all these conversations flow is that you've been through things, you've had experiences, you own those experiences as well. In the, you know, I've been through stuff, you've been through things, but we should be able to talk about them. And that's half the challenge that we face, isn't it? It's having that ability. When did you, and I want to go back, you made a really important point there about your relationship with your husband, and obviously how strong he is in your life and in his support. How and when did he sort of know that you were struggling? Did he have inclinations? Did you sort of talk to him about that? How was that?
Yeah, no, he's known that I've been struggling for a long time.
Okay.
And he's always been very supportive. He's always been kind of encouraging me to not always go down the conventional route, which I'm drawn to, because there's a security in it. Mm-hmm. And there's that's the path we go, isn't it? That's the path, that's conventional path that we go down. Sure. And so he is always, and he's also, you know, been brave and stepped out, and he's doing his own thing with film and with his short film platform. So he's always, because I've always encouraged him to do that, then he's also been very supportive in encouraging me to pursue what really makes me happy as well. Mm-hmm. And the great thing is that we can do it together. He knew, funnily enough, when I started my most recent job, the consultant job that I left, he knew a month in that it wasn't sustainable. He knew a month in, and I think it was an on-call week, and I woke up on a Saturday just in a cold sweat, just terrified. And he knew, he said, right, we've got to leave. And I said, but we've only just moved to this new town, and we've only just uprooted our life to this, you know. But he was very much like, you can't stay there. He knew very early on.
Wow, that's great. And that's such a, you know, obviously it's a wonderful relationship that you've got when you can have that openness and that candidacy around it, because lots of people struggle with that as well, right? Hiding it from their loved ones, or the loved ones might see it from one perspective, which doesn't necessarily translate into what the others see. So it's such an important part.
I do feel very lucky, I have to say. Yeah. I think if he had been less supportive, it would have been really hard for me. And I don't know, I know I wouldn't be here, you know, today telling you my story. I think life would have been very different. Still
be struggling around that. Yeah, it's incredible though. There was another piece that we talked about a little while ago, and it was around when you first started, and I'm really intrigued by this because I want to ask you a question. Do you see it coming back? So that's going to be the question. But it was about community support, you know, or the community that you were working in and the support you were getting. Do you see that coming back? Do you see a little bit of green shoots towards that? How do you feel about that now?
Yeah. So are you talking about community support, camaraderie within the NHS?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah. Going to that 20 years ago when you first started out in the NHS, because you made it really clear when we were talking the preamble stuff that, you know, that was a big part of it. You really enjoyed having that feeling. How do you feel about it now?
Yeah. Well, it did come back actually in the first, I would say, March last year, in March, April time, the first lockdown in the UK, certainly everything was geared towards treating COVID. Everyone was redeployed. It was a difficult time, but routine work was cancelled, so our focus was all on one thing. And as a result, I really did feel that camaraderie again. I felt like we were all in it together, and we were all kind of coming in, and we were getting such amazing, generous donations from the public. People were really, really generous and open-hearted, you know, rainbows everywhere, clapping in the streets. It was a really kind of, it was a lovely, it actually reminded me of, you know, those days back when I'd qualified and people would run in the middle of the night to make sure you're okay, because, you know, they'd heard someone had gone off, or a patient had deteriorated, and they wanted to check on you. So it reminded me a bit of those days. I think part of the problem is the fragmentation of teams. We don't have that much of a team structure. There's a lot of shift work. So you don't have consistency as much. And I also think that just the volume of work and the complexity of what we now deal with has also increased significantly. We've seen amazing gains in medicine, we really have, and people are living a lot longer. And as a result, they're living with slightly more health conditions than we were dealing with back then. So a lot of the landscape has changed. Do I see it coming back? I hope so. Yeah, I hope so. And I think it exists. I think it exists in places. It still does exist. I think there are some wonderful teams out there. I mean, it's so I think it exists. I think it's harder for it to exist. And I think that it will take a bit more of a top-down approach to getting back to where we have a lot more of that camaraderie.
Yeah, and it's such an important part. You've been inside the service, and I just want to say a huge thank you to you and to your colleagues and to everybody that's helped support people through the crisis and beyond, you know, because it's not going to disappear anytime quickly. Unfortunately, it's still going to be ongoing, I guess. But yeah, you know, thank you to you. And it's just, I've seen people pull together more. I've seen communities growing again. And I really hope, and that's one of the big pillars of mental health as well, isn't it? It's hope, you know, never give up hope. And it's nice to see green shoots of optimism, opportunity, and changes as well, right? So as we come out of whatever it is we're coming out of, and whenever we're coming out of it, let's hope for the best with it. We are right at the end of this conversation, but I do want to give you the last couple of minutes, really, please, Zarrin, because it's, you know, it's your story. Just say huge thanks. I've said it a couple of times already, but thank you for being just you. Thank you for being open and telling us a bit of your story, or telling us your story and your journey. Any final thoughts, things you want to share, websites you want to shamelessly plug? Over to you.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's been a real pleasure. No, I want to say that yes, I went to quite a dark place, but you know, I'm out the other end. I now love being a doctor. I love being a cardiologist. I'm doing a bit of NHS, a bit of community, a bit of setting up my project. If anyone's interested in the Fresh Heart Project, then please do check out the website. It's www.freshheartproject.com. You can also get in touch via that route. Social media, it's at Fresh Heart Project on Instagram, and there's a page on Facebook. So there are lots of different ways of getting in touch.
Brilliant stuff. Well, you know, again, just thank you. For anybody that is listening, please do go and check out the freshheartproject.com. I will drop it in the link to this as well, so you've got no excuse not to find it, because you'll be able to click on it. Huge thank you. Anybody listening, if you are struggling, if you have any challenges, worries, concerns, or anything else, please know there are always people out there that care, who want to listen, you know. So Samaritans exist exactly for that reason today. Feel free to contact Samaritans. You can call 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The number's 116 123. It's free to call, or you could text to Shell 85258. Always an option. There's always somebody there. Please know that's true. I just love the perspective that's been portrayed today. So thank you so much, Zarrin, for being so open with us, sharing your perspective. You know, I think the way people see doctors and people in the NHS has changed, and we are falling in love with you all, and we just want to send you all positivity and energy, and to you and your colleagues for those days that you're working. Stay safe and look after yourself, and thank you very much. See you soon.
Thank you so much. Thanks.
You're welcome.